Somewhere along the way, somebody told you that you have a second brain and that it lives down in your belly. Maybe you read it in a magazine while you were waiting somewhere. Maybe a doctor mentioned it once in passing. Maybe it was just one of those phrases that drifts around until everybody has half heard it without anyone quite explaining what it actually means. I want to start tonight by telling you that this phrase, second brain, gets the whole story backwards. The nervous system tucked into the wall of your gut is not the lesser copy. Not the backup generator kept in a closet in case the real one fails. Not some junior partner to the brain sitting up in your skull. By the reckoning of the scientists who have spent entire careers studying it closely, it came first. It was down there, working, running a genuine operation, long before anything resembling the brain in your head ever existed on this earth at all. I am not here tonight to hand you a warning, and I am certainly not here to hand you a worry. I am here to hand you something better than either of those. A real sense of wonder about a nervous system most people never knew they were carrying around inside them their entire lives. By the time we reach the end of this together, I do not want you picturing the thing coiled inside your belly as some minor backup to the brain you actually think with. I want you seeing it instead as the older brain, the first one, the one that was already doing serious, complicated work long before your skull had anything worth calling a mind. Stay with me and I will show you exactly why the scientists who study this closely have started saying it plainly, and why I think once you hear it, you will never quite hear the phrase second brain the same way again. Let me start with the plain, physical fact of the thing, because I think the fact alone is enough to stop most people in their tracks. Running through the wall of your gut, from somewhere up near your throat all the way down to the very end of the line, is an honest nervous system, built right into the tissue itself. Not a stray nerve or two passing through on their way somewhere else, the kind you have scattered here and there across your body, but a dense, continuous web of nerve cells layered into the wall the way wiring gets run inside a wall, rather than strung loosely along the outside of it. Scientists put the number of nerve cells living in that wall somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 million. Sit with that figure for a second, because it is not a small one. 500 million is more nerve cells than you carry in your entire spinal cord. That thick, well-known cable of nerves running down the length of your back that most of us grew up assuming was the main trunk line for everything happening below the neck. And yet here is this second cable. If you will let me borrow the phrase for one more sentence before I take it away from you for good, coiled into the wall of your digestive tract, doing its own extensive work, mostly unnoticed, for the whole length of your life. This nervous system has a proper, formal name, and as I tend to do on these evenings, I am going to give it to you once, plainly, and then set it gently back down. It is called the enteric nervous system. After tonight, I will mostly call it what it actually feels like to talk about, the brain in your gut, or simply the gut brain, because that lands closer to the truth of what we are actually describing than any clinical label ever could on its own. The structure of it was actually mapped out a long time ago, back in the 1860s, by two German anatomists working with nothing more than a microscope and enormous patience. One was named Leopold Auerbach, the other Georg Meissner, and each found his own distinct layer of nerve cells woven into the gut wall, layers that still carry their names today. They had no way of knowing, peering through those early lenses, that they were looking at the physical scaffolding of an entire second nervous system, one that would take another century and more before anyone fully understood what it was actually capable of doing on its own. To get a feel for how much nerve tissue that actually is, picture the whole length of your digestive tract laid out straight, from throat to the very end, a stretch of tubing roughly 30 feet long by the time you count every twist and turn of it. Nerve cells run the entire distance, wall to wall, the whole way down, not clustered at one end or thinning out toward the other. There is no stretch of gut left unattended, no quiet section nobody bothered to wire. And it is not simply a pile of nerve cells sitting there for decoration, the way a person might assume of tissue nobody ever thought to look at closely. It has sensing cells tucked into the lining of your gut, picking up on stretch, on pressure, on the particular chemistry of whatever has just arrived, reading the situation the moment it shows up. It has other cells whose entire job is to weigh that information and work out what ought to happen next. And it has cells that carry the decision out, telling muscle exactly when to squeeze and when to hold still, telling glands when to release whatever they happen to be holding in reserve. Sensing, deciding, acting. That is the basic architecture of any brain worth the name, and your gut is carrying a real working version of it, coiled quietly into a part of the body most of us were taught to think of as plumbing and nothing more than that. Here's the part that actually sets this nervous system apart from every other outpost of nerves in your body, and I want to slow down for it because it is the heart of tonight's whole story. Nearly every other cluster of nerves you carry outside your skull functions as a relay station. It takes instructions traveling down from the brain up top, passes them along to wherever they are needed, and reports back on how things went. It is a messenger, not a decision maker in its own right. The gut brain is the one clear exception to that arrangement anywhere in your body. It can run the entire complicated operation of digestion by itself, start to finish. Sensing what has just come down the line, deciding how firmly to squeeze and in which direction, timing wave after wave of muscle contraction so that everything you ate actually moves along steadily instead of sitting still or sloshing the wrong way, choosing what gets pulled out and absorbed into your body and what gets passed further down to be sent on its way. All of that worked out and carried out completely without a single instruction ever traveling down from the brain in your head. Picture for a moment an ordinary meal, something as simple as a bowl of soup and a piece of bread eaten at your own kitchen table on an unremarkable evening. The instant that food reaches your stomach, your gut brain is already reading it, gauging how much has arrived, what it is made of, how it ought to be broken down and moved along, and adjusting the whole operation accordingly, all without you giving it a single thought or your head brain sending down a single order. You are thinking about the television, or the conversation at the table, or absolutely nothing at all, and none of that matters to the work quietly underway in your belly. Scientists have shown this in about as direct a way as anyone could ask for. Take a length of gut, remove it entirely from the body, cut off completely from the brain and the spinal cord, every wire connecting it to the rest of the nervous system severed clean, and place it somewhere it can be observed closely in a laboratory. It keeps going. It still produces its own coordinated waves of squeezing and releasing, the same rhythmic pattern that moves material along inside a whole, connected body. Nobody is sending it orders anymore. There is no head office left anywhere to check in with, and it does not seize up or fall silent the way you might expect an orphaned piece of machinery to do once its instructions stop arriving. It simply continues doing its job, because the entire plan for how to do that job was never stored up in your skull to begin with. It was stored right there, in the wall of the gut itself, the whole time. Think about what that actually asks of a piece of tissue tucked away in your abdomen. It has to notice what just arrived. Then it has to make a genuine decision about it, over and over, dozens of times a day, every day, for the whole of your life. And it has to carry that decision out with real muscle, real timing, real coordination between one stretch of gut and the next, without ever once picking up what amounts to a telephone and calling upstairs for guidance. Every other organ in your body that handles anything even remotely as complicated leans on the brain in your head to help run the show. Your gut, very nearly alone among them, was built from the start to manage on its own. And before I go any further, if this is landing with you the way it landed with me the first time I read through it properly, go ahead and tap that like button right now. It costs you nothing, and it is the one small thing that tells somebody else out there this evening might be worth their time too. Now back to your gut. Now let's take an ordinary phrase you have used 100 times without thinking much about it, and look at it honestly for a moment. A gut feeling, that flutter low in your stomach right before you have to say something difficult to somebody you love. The way bad news seems to land in your belly before your mind has even finished working out what the news actually means. The uneasy, settling feeling before a decision you already half suspect is the wrong one. We treat all of that as a figure of speech, a poetic way of describing something that is really only happening up in the head. But here's what I want you to know. It is not only a figure of speech. There really is a brain down there, sensing, weighing, reacting, and it stays in constant, quiet conversation with the brain in your head through nerve pathways running back and forth between the two, day and night, whether you are paying the slightest attention to any of it or not. A striking share of that traffic actually runs upward, from gut to head, rather than the other direction, which may be a large part of why a feeling can arrive in your belly before your thinking mind has caught up with whatever caused it in the first place. Your head brain, in a real sense, is often the last one in the building to hear the news. I want to be careful here, because this is exactly the point where a story like this one usually gets pulled off course into talk about anxiety, or mood, or the vast community of tiny organisms living further down in your digestive tract, and that is not where I am taking you tonight. None of that is my aim here, and this is no new theory about your emotional life. I am telling you this because it happens to be simply wonderfully true. The flutter is not only a phrase your language happened to land on by coincidence generations ago and never bothered to update. It is a genuine nervous system doing genuine sensing, reporting back to you in the only language available to it, which is a feeling low in your belly rather than a sentence made of words. Now here's the part that actually reorders the whole picture. And I promised you at the start of tonight that we would get here eventually. When scientists go looking across the enormous spread of the animal kingdom for this kind of gut nervous system, they find it in creature after creature, going back a very long way. And here's the detail that matters most of all. They find it in simple animals that have no head brain whatsoever. Not a small one, not a simple one, none at all. Take the hydra, a tiny freshwater creature smaller than a fingernail, with no head to speak of and nothing that any scientist would ever call a brain sitting anywhere in its body. And yet woven into its simple gut is a working nervous system, sensing its surroundings and coordinating its own responses, doing on a small scale exactly the kind of job your own gut brain does on a far larger one. A creature can carry a gut nervous system with no head brain anywhere in the picture at all. It has never once happened the other way around. Nobody has ever found an animal with a sophisticated head brain and no gut nervous system to speak of, because the whole arrangement simply never grew in that order across the long history of life on this planet. Think for a moment about what that tells scientists about the order these two systems must have arrived in. Long before anything like a skull, or eyes, or a centralized brain organizing an entire body from the top down, animals still had to solve the oldest and most urgent problem any living thing has ever faced, which is how to find food, take it in, and get something useful out of it before it spoils or slips away entirely. Whatever nervous system handled that job had to exist first, because there was nothing else around yet to hand the job to. Only later, once bodies grew larger and considerably more complicated, once there was suddenly a real advantage in coordinating everything from one central command post, did anything resembling a head brain begin to take shape at all, built up gradually on top of a design for living that was already old by the time it arrived. The researchers who study this most closely say it plainly in exactly these terms. The gut nervous system is the first brain, and the one riding around in your skull is the second. We simply had the order backwards the whole time, for generation after generation, without anyone quite noticing. It is a little like discovering that a tree you always assumed grew from the top down, branches sprouting first and roots added on almost as an afterthought, actually grew the other way around entirely. Roots reaching down into the dark soil long before there was any trunk or branch or leaf up above worth mentioning. The part hidden from view the whole time turns out to be the part that came first. The part everyone can see and admire came later, built up on top of work that had already been quietly underway for a very long stretch of time before it ever arrived. So the next time somebody repeats that old line about your gut being a second brain, you will know something they most likely do not. It was never the second one at all. It was here first, running an entire complicated life-sustaining operation long before the brain you actually think with had so much as begun to take shape anywhere. Now, like any brain you carry, this one is not immune to time. And I think the honest, gentle truth of that is worth sitting with rather than skipping past on our way to a tidier ending. With each passing decade, the gut brain slowly loses some portion of its nerve cells, the same way other parts of the nervous system thin out gradually across a long life. The signals it sends grow a little less crisp than they once were, a little less tightly coordinated from one stretch of gut to the next. It is not a dramatic loss, and it does not happen overnight or in any single noticeable moment you could point back to. It is closer to a slow softening of sharpness in an old, dependable signal, the kind of gentle wear you would expect in any hardworking system that has been running without a single full day off for 60 or 70 or 80 years running. That quiet thinning is much of the reason digestion tends to slow down for a great many people after 60. Food moves through more slowly than it once did, and less predictably too, because the very nervous system responsible for timing and coordinating each wave of movement along the way is not firing with quite the sharpness it carried at 25 or 30. For a lot of people, that shows up simply as things taking longer than they used to, or feeling less regular than they remember from years before, without any single dramatic cause behind it. I want you to hear something plainly here, because I think it matters a great deal. That slowdown is not a failing on your part. You did not do anything wrong to earn it, and there was no simple habit you skipped along the way that would have kept it from ever happening to you. It is an old, faithful nervous system, one that has been working without any real rest since before you can remember, gradually doing its job a step or two slower than it once managed, the same way your knees, or your eyes, or your hearing have very likely eased off their own sharpest edge somewhere along the road too. You are not failing your gut. Your gut is simply growing older right alongside the rest of you, in its own particular way, at its own particular pace, same as everything else you carry. I am not going to stand here and hand you a list of things to eat or drink or take because of any of this, because that was never what tonight was built to do. Tonight is only about understanding what is actually happening down there and why. so that when digestion feels a little slower than it once did, you can meet that with a measure of patience toward yourself rather than alarm. So the next time your stomach turns over at a piece of bad news or settles into something like contentment after a good meal shared with people you love, I want you to actually notice what is happening underneath that feeling. There's genuinely a brain down there doing the sensing and the reacting. Not a poetic way of talking about your nerves, and not a phrase borrowed loosely from somewhere else long ago. An actual, ancient, working nervous system, the oldest one you carry anywhere in your body, quietly running one of the hardest and most relentless jobs any organ is ever asked to take on, hour after hour, without ever once pausing to ask your permission or wait patiently for your attention. It has been doing that work since before you took your first breath. Through every meal you have ever eaten in a hurry, standing at a counter, and every meal you lingered over for hours with people you loved. It never clocks out when the day is done, and it takes no holiday, even on the days you do. All that time, it has simply been down there, older than the very mind you are using right now to follow along with what I am telling you tonight. The thing coiled inside your belly was never the lesser echo of the brain you actually think with. It is a real, ancient, self-governing nervous system, older than thought itself by a tremendous stretch of evolutionary time, tending to the quiet, unglamorous, thoroughly essential work of keeping you fed and nourished, all on its own, without a single instruction ever sent down from above to tell it how. It was doing that work before you were born, before you had a name, before anyone up in your head brain had a single thought to think. And for most of us, it will keep doing that work, a little more slowly perhaps as the years stack up, right up until the day we finally stop needing it to. Now, the part I make a point of saying plainly every single time, because I think it matters more than almost anything else in this whole video. I am not your doctor. Nothing I have told you tonight is a treatment, and none of it is advice about digestion, about what to eat, about supplements, or about how to manage anything currently going on in your own gut. If you are dealing with real, persistent trouble down there, trouble that will not let up or that genuinely worries you, that belongs in a room with an actual doctor, someone who can examine you properly, ask the right questions about your own particular history, and look at your situation with far more care and detail than any video could ever hope to offer you. I have not handed you a plan tonight because a plan was never the point of sitting down together like this. There is no diet here, no fiber to add, no remedy of any kind waiting at the end of this sentence. What I have tried to give you instead is something simpler, and I think considerably more wonderful. A truer picture of the oldest, most faithfully working nervous system you carry, one that has been laboring on your behalf since long before you had any words at all to describe it. So before you go tonight, tell me down in the comments where in the world you happen to be watching this from, and whether any part of tonight actually surprised you, the way it surprised me the first time I sat with the idea that the brain in my own head might genuinely be the second one, not the first, and that something down in my belly had been quietly running its own extensive operation since long before my skull ever held anything worth calling a mind at all. I still find that a little astonishing every time I turn it back over in my head and think it through again. If you would like to keep sitting with me like this, looking honestly at the quiet, ordinary wonders already at work inside your own body, go ahead and subscribe, and I will keep bringing you these evenings, one at a time, always in the same honest way, week after week. For now, before you turn this off, I want to ask one small thing of you. Rest a hand low on your belly, just below your ribs, and let it sit there quietly for a while. You will not feel it working, not the way you can feel your own pulse under a palm pressed to your wrist, but it is there all the same, sensing, deciding, acting, exactly the way it has done day after day since long before you ever drew your first breath. The oldest brain you own, tending faithfully to you still, asking nothing back from you tonight but the food you already meant to eat and the years you already meant to live.